how do you instruct somebody into the efforts of actually getting it deployed and ready for the company to actually get in and start utilizing? So, like I said, with Dynamics GP, 2010 and on, they are deployed. They can be deployed. If they aren't deployed, then it's something that can be done. A couple of the prerequisites. Hopefully nobody's still on an older version of SQL, but if you are, you have to at least be on 2005 or later for reporting services to be available and installed. You have to be on information IIS 6.0 or later. And then the authoring of the report models would potentially require what's called BIS. You'll see that thrown around, but it's the SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studio of SQL Server. All included in the installation disk for SQL Server. Nice little note there is that a lot of these things are installed by default, either in an upgrade or anything along those lines. So the majority of individuals are already on the information that they need for it. The only one that may be a catch that sometimes people don't catch in the installation of SQL Server is the Business Intelligence Studio, but it's an easy installation if it wasn't there. And that's only in the event that you want to get in and design new report models and things like that for the software, for the reporting. So I'm going to walk you through, how you make sure that everything's in place. So as they get installed and they're out there, and now your DBA or whoever is administering your SQL comes back and says, they're there, have fun, and okay, how do I know? Unless they sit down and they work through it, which some of them are good about that, others are not. But you're going to verify that you connect to the report manager, folder security is in place, run a report test. If you can make it through those three, then you should be good to go, at least to move on to step number 4. You must be an administrator user at that point. So in order to do that, you have to be an administrator user on the network. Windows domain user should be an admin. If you get in and you don't have that, that's all that needs to be there. So you can then delegate that to an individual who has that appropriate admin rights, at least to get you started on getting set up. So we'll go through that context of here's how you yourself will get access to it if you didn't immediately gain that access as soon as they're deployed. And then the last part of it is just making sure that the Windows user security is set up and configured appropriately in SQL Management Studio. So I'm actually going to hop over to our environment here, because it's better to paint a picture with the actual process and everything. So once they're deployed, so if you've been out there or you've seen it, if you haven't, this is good. So we're going to go through. And in GP, there's this little area underneath Setup in Administration called Reporting Tools Setup. And this is how all the different reporting tools are deployed. So we go out, we open up that window if it works. Might just take a second because it's pulling up a couple of different data sources, but give it a second to figure it out. It did the same thing to me yesterday. But this is where each one gets deployed. So like I said, out of the box, GT has this window where you can deploy the reporting services reports, the Excel reports, and now you can actually deploy management reporter reports to GT, which means that they show up and users don't have to save a quick link or anything like that when they're deployed. They end up showing up out here also. So that's a new addition that they've added to this. But essentially, this is where the user would go in and they would point after SQL Server is configured. They would set up and say what the report server and what the report manager URL are within here. And the way to find that information, the user would, as they're setting it up and they're configuring it and doing the installation on the SQL side, hopefully they paid attention to it. Most of the time it picks up the native, it's named after your SQL server in here, so it's just HTTP, your SQL server name / report server or report. That's the most common way. The only time that you run into any variation is if you have a named instance of your database where it would show up a little bit different. But those get plugged into there, and then once they're in there, the user can then deploy them to the system. So it's pretty straightforward on the deployment side of GP. You just have to make sure that you have the underlying elements installed, this information, and then after you do that, you would hit deploy reports. And you can choose, pick and choose companies that you would deploy for. So whenever I expand that out down below, it would actually show me all the different companies that I could deploy for. So if you have Fabricam installed, maybe you don't want to deploy it for that, but you want to deploy it for any of your other companies, or you just want to introduce it to the test company, whatever it may be. So you would deploy those and then hit deploy, and then it goes out and it actually adds all of these report folders, the data models, everything like that the SRS reports are going to run off of. So after that is performed, you can immediately ping against that and gain access. So let's say that somebody's done all of this work for you up front. Now you or yourself as an admin user, as the next person in the lineup, they tell you that it's ready. How do you find it? How do you make sure that you can actually get to these reports, they've been deployed correctly, everything like that? So easiest way to do it is let's just navigate to any one of the modules you got access to. And your first reference to find out if reporting services reports are deployed, you should have an option over on the left-hand side that simply says that, reporting services reports. If that is not there, they have not been deployed at this point. So that's your first notation. Next thing to do, just go ahead and click on it. And if you have access, it's going to populate. If you don't have access, you're going to get some sort of error message or something telling you that you can't find any of that information. So that would be step number 2. If you did receive an error at that point, most likely the user that set these up has not configured what's called folder security. So that was number 1 on our list of things to do. How do we have that user verify and make sure that folder security has been configured at that point? Their easiest way is to go out to the report manager. So if I was to navigate directly from here to get to the report manager, this is your experience for SRS if you've been out there before. Pull this out. First person in sometimes takes a little bit of a time to run through it, but this is the experience from the home directory of the report manager. And that user, if you did receive that error message saying that you couldn't get to the reports, you see absolutely no reports turned up in that list, 2 things that you should look at. 1, did they deploy the reports in the first place? So you shouldn't receive an error if they didn't deploy any reports. So if you just get in and nothing displays, you probably haven't deployed the reports to your company yet. 2, if you receive a message, then it's most likely that you don't have the folder access to begin with out here. So the user configuring this would come out to the report manager and configure folder security. To do that, I'm going to go underneath the folder settings drop-down in here. And then you would simply add new role assignments and set up your specific users with your domain and the user ID thereafter. You could also go with combinations of user groups if you want to. So a user group could be assigned to this. Or you could just nuke the system and throw everyone in there, and all of a sudden everybody has access to it. So that's a nice strategy, because even though everyone has access to this, only the individuals that I name in the SQL Server and security that we'll see here as we progress through has access to run the data. So they may be able to get out here and be a browser and say, oh, here's a report name, but they won't be able to run the data that it's actually on. So that's kind of the idea there, is that a lot of times you'll see, if you get in and you look at your installation today, you might see everyone, they're set up as a browser, very limited, means they're running reports and looking at it, and only those individuals that I've identified thereafter to be a browser, a content manager, my reports, publisher, report builder, are those more of an admin role that you're looking for. So that's the first area on the report manager, to make sure that people can actually get into it, actually see the reports, see the different options that are out there, and work with it. So once they're added, if I was going to add a new role, I would say, okay, I'm going to add a new role, domain name, with the name, and then say what exactly they're going to do. And it explains what each one of these is. So the browser is the person that can get in, view, subscribe, do these different things with the reports. Content manager, somebody that can go in and manage the content, add new folders so that people can add reports into subgroups, move things around, things of that sort. My reports, they can go out and set up and manage the My Reports folder. Publisher, they can actually publish new reports to the report server. And then report builders may actually view those report definitions and make modifications to them. So report builder is usually one of those ones that we reserve for somebody who's actually sat through a session and understands writing and creating a report. Because you go in and you modify a report by accident, all of a sudden you've broken something that somebody potentially liked. So that's our first step, making sure that that folder security is out there. And this can be an extra layer added onto your security for SRS reports, where you can drive whether or not an individual can actually access individual reports. So those different security settings can be assigned to a specific report. They can also be assigned to specific folders. And if we look at the navigation on here, you can see the strategies that you could have, where let's say that you had one of the strategies that I like to do with these, especially when we get into custom reports, is I set up either a work in process or a custom reports folder where I'm deploying drafts of the customization. So there may actually be another folder up here that is some sort of staging area where you don't want everybody going in and running those until it's in a state that you're going to move it into the final area. So the way that those work is as you're in a folder with it here, you see they're all nicely named after the series that they're within. You can actually define further security on those, picking up the native setting that I set up in the home, but then I can go into purchasing and knock these off. Not everyone has access to this, so I can remove them from that, and all of a sudden you've got everywhere else is governed by the main security that I had on the home, but then on the individual, on that specific folder, it has its own definition of security. So chances are if I got into this and I couldn't view anything, I wasn't able to view it from GP or anything like that, this is the first step that needs to be set up out there is either an everyone or a definition for my specific user should be put in place to begin. And that's our first area to get in. Now the next part of that is, okay, let's say you've made it this far. And so far you like your experience, you're kind of getting around, you show reports within GP, and you were able to run a report or at least view the reports from there. You can navigate all around and everything. But then you run a report from here. Now you've got a chart and a KPI that you wanted to run, and you wanted to run your payables aging, and you run that KPI, and it fails. So that's the next part of this. And I do have a document here that will be a good follow-up document to be sent out after the session. I'll make sure everybody gets it afterwards. But one of the things that I was adding final tweaks to at the end and did not get a chance to get it out to at the end. But I've got a step-by-step document here that I developed a while back that helps kind of walk through these. So let's say that we ran that report and it did not show any data whatsoever. Came back with an error, said that I didn't have access to the data source, whatever it may be. So there's that extra layer of security, not only from being able to view and access the reports on the report manager, but there's also accessing the data behind the scenes of the reports. And that is all driven in the SQL Server. So let's go in there and make sure that everybody can at least get a general idea of where someone would start on getting the security configured for users. Because once again, circling back, security for these is not based on the GP user. You could be a power user in GP and have absolutely every access that you need within GP, nothing to do with running the data in these reports. So to instruct the user to add security to SQL Server, that user would access SQL Management Studio. So once again, back to an admin or the DBA or somebody with that tribal knowledge of the software. And it's fairly simple. They would go underneath security. And if you look underneath my login, everybody without a domain on it, that's my GP users. A really easy, quick way to identify what specific users are in this window. And then down below, you'll see where it's got the domain in front of them, the TTI Cloud. So I've gone through and I've done some configurations, but in order to add a user to be able to access the data sets, which I don't actually have GP5 on here, GP Demo 5, which means if anybody gone on here for a demo with GP Demo 5, they'd be unhappy. So to add that user would come in and say new login. They would search, and they would add and search for that user. Now this is the one that usually catches me, and I don't figure it out until a little bit long if I've had a long day or whatever it is. You do need to switch the locations on here because most of the time it defaults to the actual server name. You want the entire directory. And the reason that I changed it to that is I'm not looking for TTI 15 GP SQL users. I'm looking for TTI Cloud users. So always change that to entire directory, and then type in part of the GP name. So that user that's adding a new user out here is going to type in part or all of it. In this case, let me just do part of it. And then I hit check names on the right, and it just brings a list of those. All of the people that are out there currently in folder TTI Cloud, it's the domain users. And it'll pull up everybody that's configured in your Active Directory so far as you give it a little bit of base information to begin with. It could just be the letter A, and all of a sudden every Active Domain user group, everything out there with A in it at the beginning shows up in our list. So we would choose that user at this point, pull them in here, and I would just simply say OK. So first step out of the way. I've added a user, they're in here. Now I'm ready to configure their actual security access to the reports that are out there in GP. So then from there, I'm going to go to user mapping. And the individual configuring these would set up and say, okay, dynamics, that's our company database. We have to set that one in place with Dyn group, RPT all user, and then one of these specific roles below here. If you are, know all, see all, lucky individual that gets access to everything, there is a power user setting out here, which just gives you everything. So I'm going to set that in place for this one, but you'll notice that there's roles defined out here. We'll see those better defined as I drilled into the two database, but most of the time they match the exact naming scheme that is on your GT security role. Microsoft's done a good job to make those mirror one another, at least in their naming scheme for the out-of-the-box report or for the out-of-the-box roles that are out there. So the next one that I would choose is the two database, or whatever the naming scheme is for our database out there. Most of the time, if you're lucky, it's an abbreviation of your company, or you'll see prod or something along those lines. And then from there, we're going to choose two, in my case, for Abracam, throw on that Dyn group. And then this is where we get into that list of all the different roles that are configured. So whenever our reporting services reports are deployed and things of that sort, these are all deployed with it. All these predefined roles get defined to the system, and these are actually bolted onto the stored procedures and the views that are configured in the system already. So it goes out, it says, okay, I'm throwing all these SQL reports, Excel reports into the database. Okay, this one is sales transactions, so we're going to put order processor, customer service rep, and things like that on the back end of them for access. So your next step is making sure that you have a configuration for what matches that specific user that you're adding in. Who are they? What do they need to access? And like I said, most of the time getting an exact replica of what this is, reference back to the ones that are set up in GP for a good definition of if that user was set up in GP and assigned to sales manager or customer service rep or whatever it may be, this is the access they'd have in there. Does that give them the access to the tables that I'm looking for? Go back and relate it back to this. So there is a little bit of legwork and planning that you should definitely put into one of these as you're scoping them out. But once you have that definition, it should just be a matter of checking the boxes within here and say, okay, this user is a customer service rep and an order processor. Yeah, heck, he gets everything, whatever it may be, and you assign that. And after you're done setting those up, that's it. We say okay, and all of a sudden that user now can access the data sources that are in the system. So that is the run-through of making sure that a user is configured. And you would do this per every user. As Chris said, any of the out-of-the-box GP reports, you have to have a SQL Server user for it, which means adding a Windows domain user. Now, I've gone down the route with custom reports and things like that where we've deployed more of an Active Directory group configuration for it, which means that if you're assigned to the accounting group in your hierarchy, your company hierarchy, we could assign that group to the list of users in here versus actually assigning every individual user to keep licensing them. So if you had a bunch of custom reports that were written and everything like that, you could go with the group consolidation versus the individual users. So that's the premise behind setting these up, making sure that you have the users configured. Once they're out there, they're set up, they should be able to bounce against the database and add each one of those in there. And once you've added them, they show up in the list over here on the left-hand side. The way you know if a user does not have access to the report that they're running, most of the time the default message that it's going to throw up is user, in this case, user TTI Cloud GP Demo 5 does not have access to the data set. And it should just repeat your name. As soon as you run it, it should say, okay, here's, Sean at Turnkey Tech. You don't have access to the data source. So that's usually your first idea of why you're not able to run it. So this, I thought, was just kind of neat to get down to the nitty-gritty of, okay, we just assigned all those things, but what does it all mean? Okay, there's these RPT underscore sales order processor, customer service rep, all these different things. What does that actually do? Okay, not something that you're necessarily going to dig into, but just kind of the basis, the foundation for why those are all important. So if I was to reference back to my report manager that I've got pulled up out here, which was in the RDP, and not in that RDP, off of the RDP, but in this one. So if I was to look at this and just jump into the report manager or report designer aspect of the system, which actually is not here, but So underneath each one of these, if I was to go in, or even the SQL views, so every smart list that's set up in the system has a corresponding SQL view that's assigned to it that usually mirrors the exact name. So sales transactions, there's a table within the GP data, there's a view within the GP database that says sales transactions and things of that sort. So a lot of these reports are built off of stored procedures or SQL views, direct SQL statements, and things of that sort that are filtering out. So if I was to just weed through this, and one of the reports that I know that's set up out here, most of them have a nice little friendly name of see something. You know, you're going to see some sort of data. So they've at least done a decent job of consolidating these things. This is not something that everybody should have to worry about. But if I was to come out, let's say that I just wanted to look at if a user was going to be assigned to the cash position KPI that's out there for SRS reports, if an individual is to dig into it, look at the data set that it's built on, it's actually going out and running this specific stored procedure in the system. And what's driving that stored procedure to actually return data is what we were just configuring a moment ago. We were to come into that specific stored procedure, well, there they are. There's all those different reporting roles that were defined in the database that I was giving to those users. So in order for a user to be able to see the GL cash position KPI report that's out there that's built on that stored procedure, they must be an RPT accounting manager, bookkeeper, certified accountant, or an RPT executive, or all of the above. So they must be assigned to at least one of those to be able to review that. And you'll notice that whenever we were setting those up, that some of those do mirror from one side to the other and everything. So you always, by default, do have to set up the report all user setting in the Dynamics database, and then at least within the company that that stored procedure is running from, they need to be assigned to a role that pertains to it. And that would just be as part of the, the pecking order that you're going out there and you're putting these together, and you deploy the reports, and then you tell your accounting manager to get in, and they run the cash position, and they go, nothing returns, this is useless. And then you have to turn around and make sure that that assignment is done out here, that, okay, if they're an accounting manager in GP, chances are we're assigning them to the accounting manager RPT role in SQL Management Studio. So that's the basis. That's the foundation to make sure that you are able to get into SQL reporting services. From an end user, hopefully you have somebody on the front end that is going through and doing all the legwork for you. So all you should have to do is go out here, click on it, run the report. And we saw how to get to that. We go into GP. If we look at GP and our reports pull up, if I came in and reports show, I should then be able to go through this process of saying, okay, yeah, show me customer information. Why not? And it should take me out to the report manager. No errors, no messages, or anything like that that's bad. And then I'm out there running an SRS report. But if it's not deployed, error would have displayed here saying you don't have access to the data, wouldn't even be able to find the reports in the first place within GP. So those are the stepping stones, the building blocks that you're looking for to be in place for you to start taking advantage of the solution that's able to be deployed. So questions up to this point. I know I gave a lot of context that hopefully nobody in here actually has to beat their head on. Fingers crossed for all of you. But if it's there, at least you have kind of the foundation knowledge to say, okay, have you checked folder settings? Have you done the folder security settings, the permission settings on the report manager? No. Okay, let's start there. So the user goes out, the person configuring it gets that set for you, comes back, now you run the report. Okay, now we can get to the report, but when I run it, no data shows. Okay, did you set me up in SQL Server? No. So then they can go that route. So it's a good idea to have an idea of the stuff that has to be set up to begin with. So other questions on SRS? I know there were a few hands that came up at this point. How many people actually know whether or not they're deployed, or they're going to go and look to see if they are deployed now? I did. So the nice thing is, and one reason to get excited about these types of reports is the majority of GP reports that are out there in the system have also been deployed as an SRS report. So historical age trial balances, stock status reports, all sorts of the front runners, the big type reports have also been deployed as SRS. And what benefit does that give you is a lot of times they run a lot quicker than the out-of-the-box GP ones. So I know there's been a few people that have said something about the AR trial balance taking a little while now in later versions and things like that. You're not doing paid transaction removal or anything. A lot of these are a lot more efficient than the others because it's going out and grabbing a very complex but simplified data set defined in that sort of procedure that's out. And generally, these do run a lot quicker just to pop out because it's not having to try to run these on the older architecture of GP and the report writer. It's the newer, the SQL Server side of it. So a lot of those are deployed. And then, of course, the benefits of those is once they are out here, it's got all those friendly deployment options to save as the different features that are out here. And it's pretty simple to do that. You would run it. And once it runs out to Excel, you can open it up, and it keeps all that formatting and stuff. So it's a lot of ideas from the front end of setting these up and configuring a custom one, but then the out-of-the-box ones do have a nice deployment option, save as type function. You can see it kept all that native formatting that was out there for it. With actually the cool little thing over on the left-hand side, if a report would have a group on it, you can actually, it has all the groupings and everything within it also. And these are nice too. I know you're thinking you could go in and set up the report, deploy it as a CSV file, and that would kind of get you the same look and feel. The only difference between this one is you notice there's no page break information as I'm rolling through there. So a lot of these reports are deployed in a way that whenever they're exported to Excel, it does not have that page break, where you have to go in and clean up, trial balance report, page 15, yada yada, that shows up at the top of every single one of those. Throw those out there. So a lot of benefits to getting started with these and at least looking at them and getting more comfortable with them. There's a lot more we can do with this on a custom reporting side too, deployment-wise for your users and such too. Questions? Anything along those lines that anybody has wants to discuss? So other questions, anything like that I can answer for you guys on the actually getting started with the SRS? Okay. So the next section that I wanted to go into, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the security setups and things that you would do legwork on for the SRS reports. Next area is the Excel-based reporting. So the main drive of today's session is to go through all of the exciting things going on with reporting that are in the system. So the next section is the Excel-based reporting. So once again, like we saw in GP, all of these different Excel reports can be deployed to the system. So you can go through, you can deploy all these Excel reports. Now, what do the Excel reports give you out of the box by default? And as Bill brought it up earlier, the majority of the smart lists, out-of-the-box smart lists that you see in the system with an asterisk on them have also been mirrored as an out-of-the-box Excel-based report. So what does that mean for us is that, okay, with the deployment of GP, you have this new, quicker way of running your smart list. Take back the concept. Am I running a smart list out of the box right now and then exporting to Excel? If you're doing any of that, you should circle around and look at the Excel reports that are in the system to have something that's automatically pulling from the data set. You don't have to export it. You pull up the file, refresh the data, and you're on your way. So all of the legwork we looked at for the security in the system previous to this, or setting up the SQL Server Windows Authenticated user security, that all goes hand in hand with these Excel reports because they are all Windows Authenticated. So they're deployed with Dynamics GP 2010 and newer versions. The ability to connect to data sets, that's not a new concept for Excel. It's been around for a while. It's just nice that they put it in where they've got all these ones that are deployed with it to begin with. With GP 2013, R2, they did introduce, so if anybody's on R2 of 2013, take a look after I show you the Excel report section. There are now dashboards listed in there too. Those were those fancy looking ones that I showed in the session with Diane up here that actually give you ways of being able to look at dashboards. You get the best experience with those with Excel 2013 if you're going to run those. And the reason for for that is that they've added in some timeline type features and slicers and things like that that weren't available in older versions of Excel. So, and then you can also, one of the things that I'm going to touch on is the ability to create new Excel reports based off of queries from online or from your own base knowledge, going through and creating a new connection to the database, a new table in the system. So now you've got the ability to create an Excel report that can connect to an outside data source, something that's part of GT, or stuff that's in GT. I listed a couple of resources on here just for your knowledge that I am going to visit while we're out there. If anybody's gotten into the reporting definition and design side of GT, Victoria Uden is somebody that I constantly frequent her site for. She has a lot of really nice SQL scripts that she's written out of the box that everybody can plunder to their own liking without having to worry about calling anybody. It's only if it doesn't work that you have to talk to somebody a little bit further. So those are a couple of sites that I found good results for as we go through. So I wanted to show off and work through how the Excel reports work in the system. First of all, where we're going to find them. Oh, welcome to PowerPoint, natively throwing in the dual screens. Nope, just stop. Yay. Okay. That's a little better. So let's pull this up. Excellent. So what I wanted to show is, first of all, we saw the deployment option in the reporting tool setup. So user once again would go to administration, reporting tool setup, and then they would pick a network share location or deployment to SharePoint. So there's some exciting things that you can do on that side for the deployment. They are working further and further on Office 365 integrations, which means that all of a sudden you can deploy these Excel reports that refresh from the database on the web. But in the deployment actions, you would go through, you would find a reports directory that you want to put these to, somewhere that everybody can access it. Most of the time we throw it out in the GT share folder so that individuals can access it, because once again, in order for them to view the data or refresh the data and look at it, they have to actually have the database access for it in the first place. But we would find a network share. We would also put a user-level report directory if we wanted to have a further definition. And then you would deploy those. And the way that that looks, once it deploys, we were to go out and look at this. So if I would take that exact directory and throw that into a folder search here. So it threw them out here into the Excel report, creates two different folders, data connections, reports, throws them into the database. So we're looking almost at the same structure that we saw for the SRS reports on deployment. So it's thrown it into the database name, and then it throws it out into the individual series that were within it to be able to look at. So now we can go through that specific section, find what it is that we're looking for, and go from there. Now there's an easier way once these are deployed to kind of get to those and first of all make sure that they're actually deployed in the first place. So after they're deployed, you should end up with a menu option. So once again, back to the same premise that we had on the reporting services report, if Excel reports are deployed in the system, then there's a menu option for it on this window, on any one of the modules that you're in. If it's not there, then they have not been deployed up to this point, and somebody needs to perform the step within the reporting tool setup. Once they are deployed, we're going to come out, and right now I'm in sales. So if you're going to look at the names here, just kind of compare these, just to get an idea of what's contained within each one. So if I was to open up SmartList side by side with this, so we're in sales, let's expand sales, and then let's just expand receivables transactions. So any one of these that we see out here with an asterisk on it, the majority, if not all of those, have also been deployed with the exact same name as an Excel report. So I should be able to come out here and find something underneath the sales section where I'm at, receivables transactions, cash receipts entered today, or something there close to it. So hand these over, and there they are. So the out-of-the-box defined smart lists have already been deployed as an Excel report. So the benefit of that is now instead of having to worry about running all the data and exporting to Excel, there's already this query that's been created in the database and also in the Excel report where a user can pull this up, and given they have the appropriate security access, they'll get prompted to enable the content, which then verifies Windows authentication, and then returns no data, in my example. So I haven't, of course, as everybody knows, if you've been in Fabricam, that there is absolutely no data that resides 2015 in GP. It's all 2017, looking far into the future where computer components were extremely outdated, yet it's so expensive. So same concept for customers' average days to pay, customer balance. Let's take a look at that one. Same concept. Enable content. Yes, and all of a sudden we have an Excel report, which if we were to pull that up, that same smart list up in GP, it's structured exactly the same. So customers, customer balance, and there it is. Same column, same place. The only difference between the two, I didn't have to hit Excel at the top to get that same view out here, and I can pull this up at any time, data, and refresh, which means it goes back through and it updates my numbers. So I could build additional bits off of this, a pivot table. Take a pivot table, throw it onto another sheet, refresh this data set. Also, my pivot table is showing all that updated data. There's a lot of benefits to this where you don't have to run all the data, wait for it to calculate, and then throw it out here. And as Bill said, a lot of these are, exponentially quicker than what you would run within the smart list, especially with the sense that you don't have to kick it out to Excel. There are some cool things that you can do with this too, where there's, if we were to go back and just look at our reference, so we saw how to deploy those, where the reports are located. You'll notice whenever you're looking in the menu options, if we were to look at the option column and just pull that over far enough, you'll see two different options that are available out there. You have one that is a report. You have another that's a data connection. And data connections just have a little bit of a different interaction sometimes with them than the report. Some of them behave exactly the same. Others don't. So that's an example where it does behave the exact same. Another example of where it doesn't is if we were to go up and select one of the other ones, customer data connections. Other data connections will pull you in, and it doesn't exactly know what it needs to do. And the reason for that is that a lot of the data connections, if they're not one of the definitions that say cash or customers, customer balance, and it's not some sort of definition, it's more of the generalized term, in this case, just choosing all customers, most of the time the data sources are pulling you in, and they don't know what columns you want to see. Do you want to see the table? Do you want to see the pivot table? If I was to hit table on this, now it's pulled me into an Excel spreadsheet that is every single column available in that SQL view. So if I was to go back into Smart List, say columns, and show all the columns, this is every single column that you would find in that selection list. So that's what it's done at this point, is it's just thrown everything in here. So if you're ever looking to find, and what is it, 70 columns or something is the cap in Smart List. You can't add any more than a certain amount of columns in Smart List, something along those lines. But this doesn't have that limitation. You can grab all of those and pull them in. You'll notice as I get over here to the right-hand side, I used to know how to do this. We can see if it'll work in this environment. You can actually take this, any of the ones that you see for drill back on here, there are ways to be able to take those and make them into a hyperlink. And if you were to make those into a hyperlink, then that would allow you to click back to GP at that point, so you could have it bounce back and forth from Excel to GP. So there are some different tricks that you can do with them. So that's the idea behind the two different options that are out here. I don't necessarily suggest grabbing the data sources to begin with, especially for data sources like count transactions or something, because your system's going to blow up if you have a lot of history out there, because it's going to try to go through. And if you select table, it's going to try to run all millions of records that you have for all columns out to FO and beyond or something. So sometimes it can bog down the system at that point. But that's the idea. The data source is what all of the ones that are labeled reports are built off of, and then the reports are, of course, the smaller definition of the information that's out there. So, but a data connection, if it is a smaller subset, so if somebody created you a smaller one, a lot of times those can be nice just because it does give you that prompt to run it as a pivot table versus the other, which means that you could start with a pivot table to begin with and then go from there. So looking at these, so modifying an existing report, how would we do that? How would we take one of the out-of-the-box Excel reports and work with it, add additional things into it? So let's say we wanted to take this report, the customer balance, and all of a sudden I wanted to add in any of the aging buckets to it also. Well, to get that information, I would have to understand SQL just a little bit to be able to do so, but not entirely too difficult. Any one of these reports that you run that is a smaller subset of data, if we were to go underneath data and go to connections, there's my data source that it's built on. And if we hit properties, definition, you'll see me utilize this a little bit later, there's actually a SQL script on the background of this that is selecting from that specific view. So earlier I drilled into it on SQL Management Studio and right-clicked on one of the SQL views that was out there, and it showed the RPT assignments for the security roles and such. But essentially what we could do is we could take this same premise, and if you know the names, you can add those in. Now, here's my way of being able to kind of cheat on these if you were going to add some modifications to them. Let's say that I wanted to add the aging buckets. Well, you know what? I don't know my naming scheme. So how are those specific columns named? And most of the time, you can come out and find them underneath the list. Now, one of the things that is unfortunate is that some of them will pick up the actual name and not be the same name that was out there, but majority of them, you should be able to pull them in. If I was pulling in aging data, it's aging bucket 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't pick up a nice naming scheme like they designed out here. But if I was to go in and I wanted to add that in, it isn't that hard. We can go aging bucket 1 and just put it in brackets. Now, anytime you make a modification to one of these, you want to make sure that you export that connection file, because it's not going to save it to begin with. So if I export that, then I can throw it out there. I could take off columns, I could rename these. I could do different things that I wanted to. Maybe I wanted to reorder it. That's all I wanted to do. Whenever it generates out here, I want it to be ordered by the customer number or the customer balance versus that. But so long as you have some of the base knowledge, you can add those different elements into it. Export that data connection. When I throw it out here, customer balance with current.
What does this stuff do?
All I'm doing is I'm adding additional columns to my Excel report that's out there.
But exporting the connection.
So I'm exporting the connection because I want to save that SQL script that's embedded in there. If I just left it as it was, it would try to overwrite the original that was out there. So there are some downsides to this where if you made changes and you blew up in a data connection, it could break other people's connections from working. One thing that I always like to reassure people with is that the Excel report can be redeployed if necessary. So if you would blow up the original stuff and it no longer works, you can redeploy those back into the state, kind of like you can with the out-of-the-box GP reports. So if I was to export that, come back, and now rerun it, I was able to add that column in, which that wasn't correct. But it would run if that column was available out there. If it wasn't incorrect, it would add that back in. And now all of a sudden I have additional columns on there ordered by something different. So that's one premise of being able to go through and modify an existing report. Obviously, we could take that same report and make changes to it if I liked the way that I created it. So let me go back, not save that one, because I broke it. Let's say that I ran one, but I also created some nice pivots off of it. So I came out, I created a new or a new Excel report, or I took one of the existing ones, and I wanted to save the pivot table report that I created off of it. So I got this customer balance, and then I wanted to come in, and I said, okay, you know what? Let's do a number filter on this, and I want somebody to be monitoring people with the, the top balances that are out here. There might be a reason for them. And then using just the functions of Excel, create that pivot table off of there, or a graph, or whatever it may be. Graph would have been better. So just a little bit better visual. Take that, insert. Go on to another one, and then you could dissect it a little bit further depending on the columns that you have. Maybe you wanted to break it down a little bit further. You just wanted a grand total, whatever it may be. But after you make modifications to those, so add on a new sheet, do some pivots off of it, add in some new data, if you were to take this file and save as, and make sure that you put it back out into that same directory that you were in, and let's just call this, grand total or whatever it may be. Going simplified here, but I save it back to that exact same directory where all the other ones are deployed, and save that. Now I've got an Excel report that I've just created. That then shows up underneath my list for users to select at that point. So you can modify and add new ones with your pivots, with any other type of function that you've added into them, back into this directory for people to be able to find, so long as you save it to that directory. So there's a lot of benefits along the way of being able to create those and working with them, creating the pivot tables off of them, and then doing more of those dashboard type environments that we were looking at. Same thing for any of the ones, like I was saying, in GP 2013 R2 and beyond. Each section has those dashboards that have been deployed, which are extremely nice looking to begin with, and then you can use these to kind of do additional things that are out there in your data set. Point them at your new data or any updates, and then they've got these kind of functional dashboards that are out there. You can modify these, you can make changes to them, add additional things into it. It's got a bunch of different tabs down here, but any of the changes you made, if that's a new rendition that's beneficial to the company, save it as a new name to the directory, and all of a sudden everybody can access that new report that you have out there to work with. Yes. Yeah, any of the Excel reports, you can deploy those. What's that?
Can you show an example of that at all? Or?
I don't have SharePoint up for doing that right at the moment. So creating a pivot table report, good way to be able to modify these a step further. Refreshing the data in a report. And I always suggest that if you're going to set up this next bit within the Excel report, you want to make sure that it is a small enough data set that it doesn't take a while to run. So if it's a data set that you pull up in an Excel report and it takes a minute to run, you may not want to set it up to be to refresh on this capability. But if we were to look underneath data and connections, and any one of those data connections that this is built off of, in the properties, there is the ability, first of all, we've got the enable background refresh. So if you wanted to save this out and not have it where somebody could hit refresh on it, rerun the data, you want it to be a static report, that could be deselected. But you can also set up, from the standpoint of the dashboard, set it up to refresh every couple of minutes if you wanted to. So you could have this Excel spreadsheet pulled up and go back and reference it at any moment to see where you're at, with however the data set was pulled out there, sales dashboard showing the numbers for sales side, or you can also set up to refresh the data upon opening file, which means that every time somebody would access that report, it would rerun the data instead of them having to click refresh potentially. So a lot of ideas behind there. You don't have to run it in GP and export to Excel to get that fresh data set. You can run it through there to have it work how you want it to do. So there's a lot of capabilities in the out-of-the-box Excel smart lists that are out there. The roadblock that you may run into at some point, and what we'll talk about here in a little bit with Nick, is you'll eventually hit that wall of where your data sets, the out-of-the-box data sets with GP, are too much. There's too much data being pulled in those data sets to begin with, and now we need a narrowed scope of data that we have to look at. So at that point, you may look to creating and having an individual DBA, somebody that can handle SQL scripting, create and work on making a more defined set of data in the SQL database. And whenever that happens, so long as you've laid all the groundwork and the user has access to the views and everything else in SQL Management Studio, they should hopefully be able to point to those, or it's been assigned in such a way. But in Excel, if you haven't seen it today, if you go to the Data tab, choose from other sources, and then from SQL Server, if we were to type in the SQL Server name, hopefully somebody gives that to you. And Windows Authentication is what you want to throw in there because you want it to be based on, does my TTI Cloud GP Demo 1 have access to that data set in the first place? Now you can go out and gain access to the tables in the system to be able to look at, which are both based on SQL views and the GP tables that are out there. Yes, I know a lot of them are terrible naming schemes. The nice thing is all of the ones that were deployed that your smart lists are based off of, those show up out here, pretty much named exactly the same as they showed up. So if I wanted to connect and do one off of bank transactions or one of those that was out there, I can come in and select that from here and build out a new one, a new data connection in the system off of that SQL view that was out there. So the reports that are deployed, you can always create, connect to new data sources that are available out there through the data connections. But like I said, at some point you will hit that wall where you probably are going to need to pare down the data set that it's selecting as it works through that. So the last step that I wanted to show is taking a script from the website or from a website and throwing it into one of your out-of-the-box Excel reports, because this is where some of the things can kind of get a little bit more exciting than what we've looked at. So let's say that I went out, as I gave an example earlier, I went out to Victoria's site and I said, you know what, show me the SOP SQL views that you have out there. It's got a lot of different things out here, but sales by item rolling 12 months, kind of a neat one. So anytime you find one of these scripts, start at the select, drag down until you get to just above the go most of the time. Majority of them are the same. And I'm just going to copy that. What I'm going to do is I'm then going to use the rule that, okay, it's a sales-related report, so I need to find a sales smart list out here. And the reason that I'm choosing one of these is because I want the same security that this is built on to drive that SQL script that I'm selecting out on the web. So that's kind of my premise for this, is that I kind of want those to balance each other and to look at them. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to my data, connections, find that connection that's defined in there, go to properties, and you'll see that it's got that SQL script already out there. The main reason I'm going this route is I don't want to have to type all that out. I don't want to have to do all that bit. They've already done that for me, so all of this connection string is already there in this. All I'm going to do is take that SQL script that I snagged off of there, paste it over the top, export that file connection, and then call this to sales rolling 12 months. Save, OK, close on out of there, and there we go. So now I've taken that SQL script that was out there, and granted it's, once again, looking at 2017 or 2015 data when there is none, but I've taken that SQL script that she had out on her website, threw it into one of the out-of-the-box ones, used all the work that somebody else has done for me for the connection string and some of the other parts of it, but now I've thrown that into place without having to go in and code anything. I was able to find somebody else that had it written already, and now I'm looking at that data within here. And then I would just take this report, save as, because it is still picking up that same name that I had before, and I would just change that, sales rolling 12 months, save, and now I've got an Excel report, a custom Excel report, that can be built off of the original stuff. So scroll down, sales rolling 12 months. So there's a lot of capabilities behind this, both in the out-of-the-box functionality, getting used to the ones that are deployed with the system, finding use for them, reviewing the ones that are deployed with it out of the box, but then also further capabilities that you yourself could take, snagging SQL script from a website, pulling up one of these existing reports, and then plugging that into it, and now you have a new functional Excel report that you could work with. There's a lot of capabilities out there to these once they are deployed and ready to go, but that's kind of a quick run-through of just some of the highlights in different areas that you can get into with the Excel reports and some of the base functionality. Questions?
If you use Power Query to grab stuff, you still drop them in that same area. It's not going to work.
You could, yeah, you could use the Microsoft querying part of it. You could use Power Query. You could also use Power Pivot, those different options that are out there for it to grab. Like I did with the data connection, went in and selected that. I could also use Power Pivot to go in and select multiple tables at that point, join them together, and kind of build your own.
If I put the report with Power Query into the Excel reports folder, it'll still pull up with the
Yes, it will. Yeah, as long as it's an Excel file, Excel data connection, it reads it and pulls it up in that list.
Yeah. Much the way you were able to view the query within the data in Excel, is there a way to see the query that a smart list is running?
The query that a smart list is running?
Yeah.
So there is. You know, if you want to get into that idea and just kind of see the way that a query looks, that was where I was going with the idea that any of the out-of-the-box smart lists that you see in the system, 9 times out of 10 have a corresponding SQL view that's been created out there that matches the exact name that's ran off of it. So if I was to come out here and you wanted to look at a smart list, let's say account transactions, let's just go out, we'll take a look, and we'll do script view as, and I'm just going to throw it up. I always do it to an alter to the screen. But this is the SQL view, the data set, which looks terrible right now. Let me give you a better idea. Hopefully somebody can. That's the SQL view that the thing is written off of. And what they've done with them, and the reason that it looks so pretty in GT is because they've normalized it. They've gone through and they found all those GL 00101 and 105 and everything, and done all the joins and then named the fields pretty. So that's essentially what it's based upon. And then whenever you run one that has a predefined query to it, all they're doing is saying go out, select this column, and this column, with the search criteria that you plug into SQL.
Is that true only to the out-of-the-box ones or about
Custom smart lists, what, built through Smart List Builder or things of that sort? Most of the time, if you build it through Smart List Builder, there's actually a display SQL option in Smart List Builder that you can look at. If it's built in Smart List Designer, I don't know about that one. I think there's a display SQL in there also.
Oh, we have 2010, so.
Okay, yeah, there's still a display SQL in Smart List Builder in there, and you're not quite to Smart List Designer. So, you're welcome. Other questions? Yes.
Okay, so I'm an accountant. I'm not an IT person.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and we do use SSRS. And, this looks very techy to me, and I'm curious if anyone in the room uses these as an accountant without their IT. We're pretty self-sufficient. Our IT is there to support us, but we basically do all our own stuff. So without your IT department, can you write one of these reports? Because I'm not going to be copying SQL off a website into here to write a report. I mean, it's just not, it seems a little...
It's not feasible. So the question was, just so everybody online gets it, is this portion seemed more techy. Does it fit well for more of an accountant and financial analyst and things of that side? The further I went into it, not necessarily, but the out-of-the-box Excel reports are probably something you can utilize today and at least get the grounds for, okay, I don't have everything that I want today, but knowing that the foundation, the background, is available there to go further. And that's what we'll learn with Nick today, is how we took the out-of-the-box functionality that was out there and tailored it to make it work better. So that's kind of the idea and why I wanted to cover it, both from how you get to it and how it can work for you right now versus really digging into it and getting into the the nitty-gritty side.